Imagine this. A respected real estate agent walks into a house on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, expecting to show a potential buyer around. By the end of the day, he's found brutally murdered in the bathroom. The shower is still running, as if he were moments away from continuing his day. The buyer? Gone, leaving behind nothing but a chilling description, a limp, a cane, and the name Stephen. What followed was a mystery that shook a quiet Washington community to its core. No robbery, no clear motive, and a killer who seemed to vanish into thin air. The case would go cold for years until a shocking twist involving a former police officer would flip everything on its head. But even then, one question lingers. Why Mike Emert? Stick with me as we unravel the strange and chilling details of this unsolved mystery. A story that begins like any other day, but ends with more questions than answers. Could this have been a case of the wrong place, wrong time? Or was Mike targeted in a plot more sinister than anyone could have imagined? Join me for another ride through a strange, odd, and mysterious story here at Odd Mystery Stories. Mike Emert was the kind of man who seemed to have it all together. Living in Redmond, Washington, he was known as a successful and hardworking real estate agent with a knack for closing deals and a reputation for treating his clients with the utmost respect. In the competitive world of real estate, Mike had earned the trust of his community and built a career many envied. But behind the professional accolades was a devoted husband and a family man. Mike was married to Mary Beth, the love of his life. Their relationship was one of partnership and support, with Mary Beth often cheering him on as he worked tirelessly to ensure their future together. They were a team, deeply in sync, and their life in the quiet suburbs of Washington reflected the kind of stability and happiness many strive for. Mike had an energy about him that people gravitated towards. He was described by friends as warm and personable, the type of person who could light up a room with his charm. But he was also meticulous, a trait that served him well in his career. Mike took pride in being prepared, ensuring that every home showing, every detail, was handled with care and precision. At 40 years old, Mike was in his prime. He was living a life filled with promise and opportunity, juggling his professional ambitions with a strong commitment to his personal life. He wasn't the kind of man you'd expect to become the center of a brutal and perplexing crime. And yet, on a chilly January afternoon in 2001, everything would change. Mike's routine, a house showing, meeting a prospective buyer, would lead him into a situation no one could have anticipated. The man who seemed to embody safety, structure, and success would meet a fate so chilling and inexplicable it would leave everyone who knew him asking, how could this happen? As we move farther into this story, one must wonder, what about that day was different? And was Mike's friendly, trusting nature exploited in a way he couldn't have seen coming? The answers, as you'll come to learn, remain elusive, shrouded in a mystery that still haunts those left behind. January 4th, 2001 began like any other winter day in Redmond, Washington. Mike Emert had scheduled a home showing with a prospective buyer who identified himself as Stephen. This was part of Mike's regular routine, meeting clients, showcasing homes, and guiding them through what was often one of the biggest decisions of their lives. It was a process he had done countless times, but this day would take an unfathomable turn. The house in question was a luxury property in the upscale town of Woodinville, about 15 miles from Seattle. Mike arrived, dressed sharply as always, ready to make a lasting impression. Stephen, the prospective buyer, was described as a middle-aged man with a limp, walking with the aid of a cane. Nothing about this interaction seemed alarming, at least not at first. At some point during the showing, everything changed. At 12:30 p.m., the home's owner returned from work to have lunch. She entered through the garage and was alarmed to find the front door ajar. She was also disturbed by the sound of running water upstairs. She found the trail of blood that led to the bathroom, where she found Mike's body. He had been brutally murdered, stabbed 19 times, and was placed in the bathtub with the shower still running. What made the crime even more chilling was the apparent lack of motive. His cell phone and wallet were found in Seattle. It is unknown why the killer left them there. To add to the mystery, Mike's vehicle, a black Cadillac Escalade, was missing from the property. It was later found abandoned in a nearby parking lot, its pristine condition offering no additional clues. The police discovered the crime had been meticulously planned. They also believed the house was chosen because it was far away from any others. It's suspected that Stephen may have been hired to kill him, with his handicap merely a ruse. This would explain how a crippled man would be able to take him down. Investigators believed that the cane he had might have concealed a knife in one part of it, which was used to kill Mike. They also believed that the shower and sinks were left running so that the killer could get rid of trace evidence on Mike's body. Although Mike's diamond ring and expensive watch were taken from his body, investigators do not believe robbery was the motive. They also believed that the killer was a professional hitman. However, one question they were never able to answer was who would hire a hitman to kill him? The brutality and precision of the murder left investigators reeling. This was no random act of violence. It was calculated, deliberate, and carried out with a chilling sense of purpose. But why Mike? Why would someone target a man with no known enemies? A man who seemed to live a life of honesty and integrity? How did Stephen manage to vanish so completely, leaving nothing but questions in his wake? As time has passed, the mystery only deepened. The authorities would soon uncover some startling leads, but none that could answer the most haunting question of all. Was this a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was Mike's murder part of a plan far more sinister than anyone could have imagined? In the wake of Mike Emert's shocking murder, the Woodinville Police Department, along with the King County Sheriff's Office, launched an intensive investigation. The case immediately drew attention, not just because of its brutality, but because of the sheer mystery surrounding it. A well known real estate agent, attacked in broad daylight, in a house he was simply trying to sell. It was a crime that defied explanation. Detectives started at the scene, combing through the luxury home for any clues that could shed light on what happened. However, the crime scene presented a troubling reality. Other than the blood in the bathroom and the running shower, there was little to go on. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, and no obvious trace of a killer. The description of the suspect was equally baffling. Stephen, the man Mike had met that day, seemed to have vanished into thin air. The only information investigators had was that he used a cane and had a limp. Details that, while unusual, didn't lead to any immediate suspects. The name he provided could easily have been a pseudonym, leaving detectives without even the most basic lead. Mike's abandoned car added another layer of confusion. The sleek black Cadillac Escalade was found just a few miles from the crime scene. Parked in a grocery store lot, the car was in immaculate condition, with no signs of tampering or evidence left behind. It was as if the killer had gone to great lengths to avoid detection, erasing any trace of themselves after the act. Investigators turned to those closest to Mike in hopes of uncovering a motive. Interviews with friends, family, and colleagues painted a consistent picture of a man who was universally liked and respected. There were no enemies, no personal disputes, no apparent reason why anyone would want to harm him. The absence of robbery motive only deepened the mystery. Despite the lack of early leads, investigators remained hopeful. They began analyzing every aspect of Mike's life, looking for anything unusual. Was this a targeted attack? Was Mike somehow lured into a trap by someone pretending to be an interested buyer? Or could this have been the work of a stranger with no connection to him at all? As the investigation unfolded, the public became deeply invested in the case. The real estate community in particular was shaken. If someone as careful and professional as Mike could be targeted, it could happen to someone else. Safety concerns rippled through the industry, and agents began questioning the risks of meeting strangers in empty homes. But for the detectives working on the case, every promising lead seemed to hit a dead end. Composite sketches of the suspect were released to the public, and tips poured in, but none of them led to a solid suspect. As more time passed, the case began to grow cold, leaving Mike's family and the community with more questions than answers. What kind of person could commit such a calculated and brutal crime only to disappear without a trace? And how could someone like Mike, with no known enemies, become the victim of such a heinous act? The answers, it seemed, lay buried beneath layers of deceit and a killer's meticulous planning. But as investigators would eventually learn, the truth wasn't far away. It was just waiting to be uncovered in the most unexpected way. Years passed without any significant progress in solving Mike Emert's murder. Leads dried up, and the case grew colder with each passing day. For Mike's wife, Mary Beth, and the investigators who worked tirelessly to find answers, the lack of closure was a constant source of frustration and pain. Then, over a decade later, an unexpected breakthrough changed everything. In 2011, new advances in DNA technology provided investigators with an opportunity to re examine the evidence from Mike's case. While the crime scene had yielded few clues initially, traces of DNA had been collected but left unanalyzed due to the limitations of forensic science at the time. With the advent of more sophisticated techniques, authorities revisited the case, hoping to finally identify the person responsible. The results were startling. The DNA was matched to Gary Kruger, a former Seattle police officer who had turned to a life of crime. Kruger's record revealed a dark and troubling history. He had been involved in multiple robberies and other criminal activities, displaying a level of cunning and brutality that made him a prime suspect. But this breakthrough came with a devastating realization. By the time Kruger was identified, he was already dead. In 2010, he had died during the commission of another crime, a botched robbery attempt in Bellevue, Washington. His body had been found at the bottom of a lake. Investigators believe he drowned while trying to flee a home invasion gone wrong. The man who might have held the answers to Mike's murder had taken his secrets to the grave. The revelation raised as many questions as it answered. How did Kruger come to cross paths with Mike? Was he truly the man behind the murder, or could there have been others involved? Investigators couldn't definitively say what Kruger's motive might have been, but his criminal history suggested he was no stranger to calculated and violent acts. For Mary Beth, the DNA match brought a mix of relief and sorrow. While it confirmed that progress had been made, it also meant that justice could never truly be served. There would be no trial, no opportunity to hear Kruger's side of the story, and no chance to understand why Mike had been targeted that day. The identification of Gary Kruger left investigators piecing together a puzzle with crucial pieces forever missing. What remained was a chilling portrait of a man capable of unspeakable acts and a case that, despite its breakthroughs, still felt unfinished. Was Kruger acting alone? Was he hired by someone else? Did he know Mike personally? Or was this just a random act of violence? The answers remained elusive, leaving the community to grapple with the lingering questions of a case that had haunted them for over a decade. As investigators reflected upon the case, they were left with one undeniable truth. While science had provided a name, it still couldn't provide the full story, and for those who loved Mike, the absence of that story meant the mystery of his death would never fully fade away. The identification of Gary Kruger as the likely suspect in Mike Emert's murder provided a critical piece to the puzzle, but it didn't solve the mystery. With Kruger's death, investigators were left to piece together his possible motives and determine whether he had acted alone or if there was something more to the story than met the eye. One theory that gained traction was that Mike had been the victim of a targeted attack. Gary Kruger's history as a former police officer turned career criminal and hitman suggested he was capable of meticulously planning crimes. Could Kruger have been hired to eliminate Mike for reasons yet unknown? The calculated nature of the murder, combined with the lack of evidence left behind, suggested the work of someone experienced in evading detection. Another possibility was that Kruger had targeted Mike as part of a robbery attempt. Although Mike's diamond ring and expensive watch were taken from his body, investigators do not believe that robbery was the motive. Some theorized that Kruger may have lured him to the property under the pretense of being a buyer, intending to overpower him and steal high value items. But if robbery was the motive, why leave without taking anything? And why the excessive violence? The brutality of the attack raised even more questions. Mike was stabbed multiple times, a level of violence that seemed deeply personal. Yet, investigators found no connection between Mike and Kruger that would explain such animosity. This disconnect left many wondering, was there something in Mike's life that hadn't yet come to light? Some speculated that Mike's work as a real estate agent might have put him in contact with unsavory individuals. The high stakes world of luxury property sales could occasionally attract dangerous characters. Could Mike have unwittingly become entangled in a dangerous situation involving money, property, or someone with a vendetta? Then there was the possibility of a random act of violence. Kruger's criminal history showed he was no stranger to opportunistic crime. Could Mike simply have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim chosen for no other reason other than circumstance? Yet, despite these theories, many details didn't add up. Kruger's description, a man with a limp walking with a cane, didn't match his physical condition at the time of other crimes. Was this part of an elaborate disguise, or could it suggest that someone else was involved? The lack of definitive answers only deepened the mystery. For Mary Beth and those who knew Mike, lingering questions were agonizing. Theories provided possible explanations, but they couldn't fill the void left by the absence of concrete evidence or testimony. The case remained a haunting example of how even the smallest unknowns could cast long shadows over the search for justice. As I explored the implications of these unanswered questions, it's hard not to wonder, was Mike's murder a case of intricate planning, a crime of opportunity, or something even more sinister? And with so many pieces of the puzzle still missing, will the truth ever come to light? Even with the DNA breakthrough that identified Gary Kruger as the likely perpetrator, the murder of Mike Emert remains shrouded in mystery. For those who continue to examine the case, the lingering questions are as haunting as the crime itself. With no trial, no confession, and no definitive motive, speculation has filled the void left by the absence of hard answers. Investigators have debated whether Kruger acted alone or if he was part of a larger, more complex plot. The lack of evidence linking him directly to Mike, apart from the DNA, has fueled theories that someone else may have orchestrated the crime. Could Kruger have been hired to target Mike for reasons unknown, or did their paths cross by chance, resulting in a deadly encounter? Another perplexing element is the methodical nature of the crime. Kruger's criminal history suggests a penchant for calculated actions, but Mike's murder stood out for its savagery. The excessive violence of the attack seemed personal, yet no evidence surfaced to indicate that Kruger and Mike had any prior connection. If robbery wasn't the motive, and there was no apparent personal vendetta, what drove Kruger, or whoever was behind the crime, to such an extremely violent act. The lingering mystery has also taken an emotional toll on Mike's loved ones, particularly his wife, Mary Beth. Over the years, she has faced the painful reality that the person responsible for her husband's death would never be held accountable. While the identification of Kruger brought some measure of closure, it left her with more questions than answers. For Mary Beth, the why of it all remains an open wound. The community, too, continues to feel the effects of the unsolved nature of the case. While advances in forensic science have provided some clarity, they've also highlighted the limitations of what technology can achieve. DNA may point to the suspect, but it can't reconstruct the full story. It can't explain the motive, nor can it provide the final moments of a life lost too soon. Over time, interest in the case has waned amongst the general public, but for those who knew Mike, the mystery is far from forgotten. It serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile life can be, and how even the most ordinary days can take a dark and unexpected turn. What remains are the pieces of a puzzle that refuse to fit together, a story with an ending that feels incomplete, and so the questions persist. Was Mike's murder a random act of violence, or was it a meticulously planned crime? Was Gary Kruger the sole person responsible, or was there someone else behind the scenes pulling the strings? For now, the answers remain out of reach, locked away with a man who can no longer be questioned. But as history has shown, even the coldest cases have a way of resurfacing. Could new evidence or a long buried confession one day bring the truth to light? Or will the murder of Mike Emert remain a chilling mystery, a story without resolution? For those left behind, hope remains that one day new evidence might surface, or someone with knowledge of the crime might come forward. Until then, Mike's story endures as one of Washington State's most perplexing and heartbreaking mysteries, a chilling tale of a life interrupted and a mystery that refuses to fade. In the end, we're left with the same question that has haunted this case from the start. Will the full truth of why what happened to Mike Emert ever come to light, or will it remain locked in the shadows, leaving us to wonder about the hidden motives and dark intentions that led to his untimely death? Hey, thank you again for joining me in this odd mystery. If you enjoyed this story, you might also be interested in the story of Lindsay Buziak, the unsolved real estate mystery that haunts Victoria. You'll find the link to that story in the upper right corner of your screen. Your support helps keep these stories alive, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And for those who'd like to further support the channel, be sure to check out our online store for exclusive merch and more. Thanks for watching.